I've been attending church most of my life, ever since I was a little child, and so I was trying to figure out how many sermons I've listened to at church over the years. I think I'm somewhere around 2,500 to 3,000 sermons that I've listened to in my life. And to be honest, most of us forget most of the sermons that are ever preached, which is really very reality check for most pastors. Like, we stand up and we preach and we know that you're going to forget most of what we say. But I remember this one sermon that was the shortest sermon I ever heard. It was one word. Pastor got up. He was a guest preacher at our church on a Sunday. He got up. He took a deep breath and he exhaled and he went, "Help!" And then he sat down. And I always remember that sermon. And I want to be upfront with you. I'm going to let you know today's sermon is going to be longer than that. But that sermon, the reason why I remember it is because it powerfully illustrates what so many people feel, that sometimes we are in spots in life where we are just completely desperate for God to show up. Sometimes there are things going on where the only word that can come to our mind is help. And we don't even know what else to say. Today we're in the final week of our series, Who is Jesus?, as we continue to journey through the book of Luke together. And today we're going to see the story of two people who are incredibly desperate in their lives. They are, first of all, a very well-respected religious leader, and then a woman who seems to be really unimportant to most people. But both of these people are going to discover the exact same truth, and that is this: Jesus is the one who meets desperate people with compassion and power. Let me read for us these verses, and then we'll spend some time unpacking them, beginning at verse 40 of Luke chapter 8. When Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Just then, a man named Giles came. He was a leader of the synagogue. He fell down at Jesus' feet and pleaded with him to come to his house, because he had an only daughter, about 12 years old, and she was dying. While he was going, the crowds were nearly crushing him. A woman suffering from bleeding for 12 years, who had spent all she had on doctors, and yet could not be healed by any, approached from behind and touched the end of his robe. Instantly, her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowds are hemming you in and pressing against you." "Someone did touch me," said Jesus. "I know that power has gone out from me." When the woman saw that she was discovered, she came trembling and fell down before him. In the presence of all the people, she declared the reason that she had touched him and how she was instantly healed. "Daughter," he said to her, "your faith has saved you. Go in peace." While he was still speaking, someone came from the synagogue leader's house and said, "Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore." When Jesus heard it, he answered him, "Don't be afraid. Only believe, and she will be saved." After he came to the house, he let no one enter with him except Peter, John, James, and the child's father and mother. Everyone was crying and mourning for her. But he said, "Stop crying, because she is not dead, but asleep." They laughed at him, because they knew she was dead. So he took her by the hand and called out, "Child, get up." Her spirit returned, and she got up at once. Then he gave orders that she be given something to eat. Her parents were astounded, but he instructed them to tell no one what had happened. So last week, we saw Jesus on the opposite side of the Sea of Galilee from where we are this week. Last week, he was in what's called the land of the Gerasenes. And on that side of the Sea of Galilee is mostly pagan villages, people who want nothing to do with any religion at all. And while he is there, Jesus sets one man free from spiritual oppression. Powerful, powerful story that we looked at last week. And while he's there, though, the rest of the people kind of get freaked out by Jesus and want nothing to do with him, push him out of the region and say, leave here and go. So Jesus does. He gets back in the boat with his disciples. They travel back across to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And as they go back to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, he is going back to what is mostly religious villages, people who mostly have a Jewish background. And Jesus returns, and he goes from crowds pushing him away to a space where the crowds are waiting for him. They're so big, the Bible says, that they are nearly crushing Jesus as he comes and gathers there. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a video of like bands or musicians where people are mob rushing a stage, or people see someone famous in town and they mob rush the person when they see them in town. That's the kind of image I see in my mind when I read this story in Luke. Jesus is like a first century rock star to these people, okay? Not because he's there to entertain them, but because they've all heard the stories of what Jesus can do. They've heard the stories of how he's healing people, and they are desperate. They need Jesus to show up for them. They want Jesus to show up and change their life. They believe Jesus can heal their problems. And that reality that happened there and then is the same reality that is today. There are desperate people everywhere. We don't often see it or pay attention to it because, to a great extent, in our culture, we still keep things pretty private. We live in our comfortable houses with our fenced-in backyards, and we kind of keep things mostly to ourselves. We live to curate an image of ourselves that everything's okay. But all around you, I promise you, there are desperate people everywhere. They are in our communities, they are in our workplaces, they are in your neighborhoods. I mean, I remember vividly a time where if you were go up and down the street of my neighborhood, you would say, these are people who kind of have it all together. And then I remember one day hearing a story of someone who had all their clothing thrown out in the front yard because their wife kicked them out of the house. And you realize, they don't have it all together as much as you think they do. Desperate people are even in our churches. There are people in this room. For some of you, maybe it's a health condition that has just completely worn you down. You're exhausted. You just wish the story would change. For some of you, it's relationship issues. You're like, I've tried everything that I know to try, and I can't fix the problem. And I'm just at the end of my rope. I don't know what else to do. Some of us are in deep financial waters. We're in deep holes financially. We don't know how we're going to get out of it. We're desperate for something. Or there's huge financial mountains in front of us, and we don't know how we're going to climb the mountain. Some of us are dealing with mental health realities and suffering that leaves you in such a dark place. You're desperate for anything to change the story. And one of the things that consistently happens for people who are desperate is that they also feel alone. Sure, there's something inside of us that knows there's other people out there who are struggling and suffering and going through it. But it's kind of this theoretical thing. It's out there. But deep down inside, we still feel all alone. And I just want to tell you, if you're here today and you're feeling desperate, I want to promise you and assure you, you are not alone. You are surrounded by people who have, at some point in their life, felt desperate, and maybe even today are feeling desperate. And so bring other people into your story, but don't only bring other people into your story, bring Jesus into your story too. One of the things that always surprises me about Jesus is that no matter who you are, Jesus is not too busy to care for you. All these crowds of people are swarming Jesus. Luke says that they're nearly crushing him. They're swarming him so much. But in this story, Jesus still, amongst all the masses of people who are crushing him, is still able to personally engage with two people who are incredibly different from each other. The first one we see is Jairus. Verse 41 tells us that Jairus was a leader of the synagogue. He would have been a very prominent male religious figure in the community. Now, if you know the stories of Jesus, you know that those who came from the world of the synagogue were not usually all that friendly to Jesus. But Jairus had something that was a bigger issue than Jesus. Jairus' dad heart was broken. He has a 12-year-old daughter who's dying. And if you're a parent, put yourself in Jairus' shoes. You can imagine the agony when you feel like there's no hope for your 12-year-old daughter. If you're a dad with daughters, you really get it. Like, I've got 3 sons and 1 daughter. I say I love all my kids equally. My boys will tell you that there's just something about my daughter that she gets the favor treatment. She does. It's true. There's just something about your daughter. And when your child is in that kind of a spot, as a parent, everything in you would want to fix the problem. But in this kind of a situation, you're completely powerless to do it. And you can almost picture the kind of mental anguish Jairus is going through. He's like, I know I'm a religious leader in the synagogue, and we're not supposed to like Jesus. But honestly, if he can heal my daughter, man, isn't that bigger and more important than me getting along with all the other people in the synagogue right now? His desperation leads him to putting his reputation, his career on the line for the sake of the well-being of his daughter. His desperation leads this man who has so much power and influence to come and to kneel before Jesus and to say, I need you to help me. Would you please help me? Do something about my problem. Now, the second person in this story is a woman who's been bleeding for 12 years. And in so many ways, this woman is the complete opposite of Jairus. She's got relatively low social status because she's a woman. Second, the reality of the bleeding from her body would have left her to be considered completely ritually unclean. She would have been considered to be living in a perpetual state of impurity. And that would have meant she had to live in isolation from other people. We got worked up living in isolation for like a year or two during COVID. 12 years of isolation from other people for this woman. 2 very different people amongst a massive crowd of needs. And Jesus sees each of these people. And he personally connects with each of them. I'm always amazed at how Jesus doesn't get overwhelmed by all the needs of people. Every day, billions of people go to God in prayer. Billions of people are saying, can you help me with this problem? Now, I don't know how many emails or text messages or requests you get every day, but for me, at the end of most days, I'm tapped out. Like, I can't handle any more people giving me more requests. I'm exhausted. I don't have the bandwidth to handle every need and request that comes my way. But Jesus is different than you and me. He's never overwhelmed by the needs of people. Like, I have to prioritize needs and requests that come my way because you and I, like, we can only do so much, right? But Jesus, he doesn't have to do that. Jesus can meet the needs of any person, no matter who you are. And the good news is that no matter who you are, Jesus is not too busy to care for you. You might be someone, you go, hey, but I've got no money, I've got no status, I've got no sense of importance in the grand scheme of life. And I want you to know you're exactly the kind of person that Jesus came to show compassion to. You might be someone who's the complete opposite. Like, you've got access to the best professionals, the best care, but nothing seems to give you any hope or solutions. Maybe you've even convinced yourself that Jesus only helps people who have no resources. And I want you to know, you're also the exact kind of person Jesus came to help. Sometimes, like, we wonder how on earth Jesus could possibly care about our situation when there are so many problems in the world. But the Bible tells us that God is fully omnipresent. He is fully present everywhere at the same time, which means Jesus is never too distracted, too busy, too overwhelmed for you. Now, I know that for some of you, your desperation feels like it's been kind of dragging on for a long time. And you're somewhere between that state of being desperate and actually becoming hopeless. Maybe you've already crossed the line and you are hopeless because nothing seems to be changing. What this story shows us is that what feels hopeless to you is never hopeless when Jesus is involved. Like, imagine being this woman. 12 years of suffering and isolation. Put yourself in her shoes. Her suffering was the same amount of time that Jairus' daughter had been alive. She spent all she had on doctors. Nothing was working. Like, imagine the emotional roller coaster that she's going on. You go to your family doctor, you hope for an answer from your family doctor. He does some tests, puts you on some medication, doesn't work. He's out of ideas, so he says, I'm going to send you to a specialist. You wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait, and you finally get into the specialist, which gives you hope. You're excited. You're into the specialist. You're like, maybe they'll know what to do. They put you on some treatments, and those treatments seem promising, but then they don't work either. And on and on and on you go. Maybe this one will have the solution, only to find out they don't. And not only do they not have the solution, but now you're out of money and out of options. But Jesus. Jesus was the one who has the power to instantly stop her bleeding. No medication, no physio, just the power of Jesus showing up. I don't know if you've ever experienced that happening before. I've experienced that. It's amazing to see. I've known people who've had incredible pain and diseases and challenges and problems in their life. And I've had the privilege of praying for them and with them. And I've watched as Jesus has instantly changed stories. And I want to tell you, if you don't believe Jesus can instantly change a story, you are missing out on something. Jesus still has power to instantly change any story. But I'll also be honest with you. Most of the time, it doesn't feel like it happens that way. Sometimes you can hear the stories of how Jesus is healing and helping other people, but he doesn't seem to show up in your desperation. And that can leave a lot of people really confused. Like, am I doing something wrong? Does he love them more than he loves me? Am I destined to be stuck with the problem forever? Like, imagine being Jairus in this story. You come to Jesus, you ask him to help with your daughter, and he starts to make his way to your house, and you're going, all right, something's going to happen here. Jesus is coming to help my daughter, to heal her. Like, Jesus, hey, just follow me. I'll lead you out of this crowd of people. I'll lead you to where my daughter is. I'll bring you to my house so you can see her. And like, just follow me because there's all these people here. Like, wait, Jesus, what are you doing? Don't stop, Jesus, please don't stop. There's so many people here. Why are you stopping, Jesus? Like, if you stop, you might get distracted and deal with them instead of coming to help me with my problem. But sure enough, Jesus, he stops to help a woman who simply touched him. And as he's talking to this woman, and you're looking and watching him talk to this woman, someone comes and whispers in your ear and tells you, hey, don't bother Jesus anymore. Your daughter's dead. Now imagine being Giles in that moment. What goes through your mind in a moment like that? There's that instant of shock. You've gone from this huge hope to like that. Hope is gone. You get angry. Why did this get in the way of my daughter getting the help that she needed? Maybe you're disappointed. Like, why did Jesus stop for her and allow my daughter to die? He didn't even need to talk to her. He had already healed her. And I'm sure there's at least someone in this room who's feeling some of those same things today. Why is he helping them, but he doesn't help my situation? And maybe you're even saying to yourself, like, don't bother Jesus with this anymore. It's hopeless. Nothing's going to change here. I've had times where I felt that way. I can tell you, like, for some reason in my family, I have been surrounded by so many people that I love and care for deeply, who've gone through some of the most heartbreaking, difficult of circumstances. And I pray and I pray and I pray, and nothing seems to change for them. And I go, like, why is the story not changing? Where are you, God? And then at some point, I just stopped praying because I'm like, am I just bothering Jesus with this now? Here's how you know that you've given up hope. You've given up hope when you stop bothering Jesus with the problem. Because you're like, there's just no point. There's either nothing he can do or nothing he's going to do to resolve this situation. But what I love about this story is that Jesus shows us that even death is not the end of hope. That Jesus is the one who heals broken bodies and restores broken relationships. When he heals this woman, he shows he has power to heal shame and to reconcile her back to relationships. Jesus is the one who can heal what's been broken for years. And when it even seems like he missed his opportunity because the person dies, he's the one who overcomes death itself. Every single problem or pain that makes you and I feel desperate is not a problem for Jesus. It's an opportunity for him to show just how much he loves you and cares for you and how powerful he really is. What feels hopeless to you is never hopeless when Jesus is involved. And the good news is that healing and wholeness are available to anyone who comes to Jesus with faith. Giles and this woman in this story are perfect illustrations of a theme that shows up again and again throughout the scriptures. That no matter who you are or what your background is, if you come to Jesus with faith, he meets you with compassion and power. Now, I know as soon as I say that, everyone has their own idea that comes to mind, what I mean by coming to Jesus with faith. Some people think, well, faith is just a set of beliefs about God. It's the things I believe to be true about God. And I want to say to you, that's not faith, that's knowledge. Okay? The Bible teaches us that even the demons have knowledge. Even the demons believe certain things about God. That's different. It's good to have knowledge, but that's not the same thing as having faith. Some people come from a background where it's like, I have to be able to see everything and verify everything in order to have faith. That's also not faith. That's called having facts before you make decisions. And frankly, in a world of AI and algorithms, you see things every day and you make a choice of whether or not you're going to believe it's true. Some people have been burned by people who said, hey, you just don't have enough faith, and that's why God's not showing up. And so we just don't want to talk about faith as being an important thing in situations like this, because we don't want to talk about the heartache that happens when we're left disappointed. But the thing is, biblically, you cannot ignore the importance of having faith. Here's what faith is. Faith is just simply this: personal trust and confidence in Jesus. Faith is just simply having trust and confidence in Jesus. I want you to see two words that show up in these verses. In verse 48, Jesus says to the woman, he says, your faith has saved you. That word faith that shows up there is a word that means your confidence in God in this moment has saved you. In verse 50, Jesus says this. He says, only believe and she will be saved. That's what he says to Giles. That word believe carries the same idea as faith, but it's written out as an active, ongoing action to be taken. That faith is something that's found both in a moment and as an ongoing posture of our lives. Martin Luther described and defined faith this way. He said, faith is a living, daring confidence in God's grace, so sure and certain that a man would stake his life on it 1,000 times. There are a lot of things you and I can study and learn about Jesus, but your ability and my ability to experience and deeply know the love of Jesus, at some point it's going to require faith. Now you might say, like, well, what does that mean though? Like, what does it look like? So if you're struggling with what does faith look like, I want you to take out your phone right now. I'm going to give you 4 quick application points. I want you to write these down in the notes on your phone so you can go back and reflect on these over the course of this week. 4 quick application points of what faith looks like. First one is this: faith is humble enough to ask Jesus to do what you can't do. That's what happens in this story. Jairus comes and humbles himself before Jesus and asks Jesus to do what he can't do. And for some of us who are going, like, I'm struggling to have any kind of faith, faith says that you can even go and say, God, I'm struggling to believe right now. Would you even help my belief? Faith looks like being humble just to ask Jesus to do what you can't do. That, for many of you, is just the starting point. If you've given up praying and asking Jesus to show up in your desperation, your first act of faith is going back to praying and asking Jesus to show up. Second thing of what faith looks like: faith keeps reaching out to Jesus even when there's roadblocks in your way. Think about what's going on in this story. All these people are crowding around Jesus. Think about this woman who's so desperate that she kind of figures out how to navigate her way through this whole mass of people who are crushing Jesus, all because she's like, if I can just touch even part of his clothing, I know I can be healed. Faith says, whatever the roadblocks that are coming at me that are trying to get in the way of me connecting with Jesus, I'm going to push through those roadblocks because Jesus is more important. Third thing of what faith looks like: faith preaches Jesus to fear. I know when you're desperate, it's normal to be afraid. Jesus says to Jairus and his family, he says, hey, don't be afraid. Just believe and she'll be saved. Sometimes you have to just be honest enough to say, I'm scared right now. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm afraid. But the God I serve is bigger than my fears. I trust him still to come through in this. And the fourth thing faith looks like is this: faith trusts and obeys even when it doesn't make sense. There are so many things where Jesus says things, and it's like, man, this doesn't make sense. Jesus says to Jairus, like, hey, we're going to go back to your house. Well, she's dead. Yeah, let's go. But she's dead. Nah, she'll be fine. And everybody laughs at him. But Jairus is like, let's just keep going because Jesus says, let's go. Faith says, I'm just going to obey Jesus, even when it doesn't make sense to anybody. Now, I want to say this. A lot of times we put our emphasis on how strong is my faith, how great is my faith, how big is my faith. And I want you to know, the story of Scripture is not about how big or great your faith is. The object of your faith is what matters. That's where the real power lies. The real power is not in you and your ability to believe enough. The real power is in the one you are believing and trusting. I want you to imagine you're sitting in a hospital waiting room while someone you love is getting ready to walk through some life-threatening surgery. And on the day of the surgery, your mind is racing through every possible outcome of what could happen. You see the doctor walking through the doors, and the doctor says to you, I know that everyone else has told you that nothing more can be done, and I just want to tell you this. This situation is not beyond my ability. I can fix this. Immediately, when a doctor says that to you with that level of confidence, there's at least a spark of hope that comes back into you. Your hope would rise. Your faith would start to rise again. And I want you to know that's what Jesus wants you to hear today. Whatever you're desperate for, Jesus is coming into the room right now, and Jesus is saying to you, the situation's not too big for me. The same Jesus who walked into the life of this woman who'd been suffering for 12 years is still here in this room to help you in your desperation. The same Jesus who walks into the house in first century Galilee is the same Jesus who meets us in our desperation today. So whatever situation feels hopeless in your life right now, bring it to Jesus, because he's the one who meets desperate people with compassion and power. Don't ever stop bringing your desperation to him, because what feels impossible to you is possible with him. The reason that you can have confidence in your healing and your wholeness is because the entire reason Jesus came to this earth is for your salvation. Like most of us, we're really desperate for God to fix our problem. Just like the woman in this story. Like, Jesus, I've been bleeding for years. Fix my problem. Make this stop. But Jesus doesn't come just to fix one problem. Jesus came to fix every problem. What Jesus does when he heals this woman, he does so much more than what we see on the surface, because he doesn't just change her physical condition, he changes her eternal condition. See, the reality is every single human is in far more of a desperate state than what we care to acknowledge. The Bible says that you and I are sinners, and that sin has one significant consequence, and that's death. Both a spiritual separation from God and a physical death. Romans 6:23 says the wages of sin is death. Now, generally, when it comes to God, there are two ways that people try to make things right with God. We either have faith in ourselves, which is where most people land. How can I work harder to be a better person in order to make things right with God? We put faith in ourselves. If I'm just good enough, then things will be right between me and God, and he'll let me into heaven one day. The problem is, you are not good enough to ever work hard enough to be perfect enough for God, which makes the human condition even more desperate, because there is no solution but God. There is an answer to your desperate situation, and the answer is Jesus. In John chapter 11, Jesus says, if you believe in me, you will never die. Jesus was perfect for you. Jesus paid the penalty for your sin on the cross. And you can put your faith in yourself, or you can put your faith in Jesus. The promise Jesus makes is that when you put your confidence in him, you're going to have eternal life. Jesus says in these verses, his grace combined with her faith made her a daughter of God. And the same can be true for anyone who comes to Jesus with faith. But what we see again and again is that Jesus responds to faith and brings salvation. Now, when you see the word salvation, understand this. The work of salvation is full and complete in every way. Jesus does not partially save people. He goes all in saving people. He rescues, he restores every part of your life. Like, if you've placed your faith in Jesus, you can have confidence of this. The salvation that Jesus comes to bring is not simply removing the death sentence from your life. To Jesus, salvation is the complete healing and restoration of everything that is wrong. So if you're here today and you've got faith in Jesus and you're facing a desperate situation, your healing and your life being made whole is not a matter of if, it's only a matter of when. For Jesus, death does not get in the way of his goal to bring healing and wholeness to your life. Jesus makes all things right, whether it's in this life or it's after our death. Now, you might know that already, but the truth is, when we're desperate, we forget it. The truth is, when we're desperate, we just want the thing changed right this second. It's one of the reasons why we lose hope, because we want it changed in the moment, and Jesus sees the eternal story, the bigger story that he's unfolding of your salvation. It's so easy to miss or forget the promises of God to you and I. And it's one of the reasons why celebrating communion